Hey, Pastor Steve Waldron here today. We're going to take a look at fasting in the New International Version of the Bible. Now, most of you know there is a New International Version. It came out in 2011. Now, this is not the 2003 TNIV that so many came out against, but this is 2011. They updated the New International Version, and I think they've actually kind of reinserted some fasting scriptures in the New Testament in there, but it's still real weak on fasting. So let's take a look, because that was one of the things. A lot of people really looked at the New International Version and said, man, it's weak on fasting. Now, this is still missing Matthew 17:21. Howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. Howbeit this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. We will show you. Brother Mallory's going to zoom in here. I thank the Lord for the Mallorys, that is just totally missing in the New International Version. Occasionally they might put it in the footnote saying the oldest and the best manuscripts don't have it, or something along those lines, but you wouldn't suspect it was supposed to be in there. It never ceases to amaze me sometimes when something's in the footnotes, people say, it's still there, you know, it's still in my Bible. It's like, well, Satan certainly cast a lot of doubt on that. So that's the very first thing on fasting. Matthew 17:21 is out of there. And so let's take a journey through some other things. Acts chapter 10, verse 30, we've got Cornelius. Acts chapter 10, verse number 30. Now, when they reinsert things like fasting, then you have this question, were they wrong in the 1984 edition, or are they just doing it because it's hurting sales? And so there's so much missing about fasting, people teaching. They're like, we better reinsert some of these because we're losing sales. That is a pertinent question, believe it or not. So Acts chapter 10, verse 30 says this in the NIV. Let's see if we can find it here in the paragraphed NIV. Cornelius answered, 3 days ago I was in my house praying at this hour at 3 p.m. Of course, in the King James Version, it's going to give us something about fasting and the importance of fasting. The gospel came to the Gentiles because somebody was fasting. And Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting until this hour. And at that ninth hour I prayed in my house. So fasting is taken out there. So you can see it really weakens the doctrine of fasting. And then 1 Corinthians 7:5, talking about relationships. That's kind of the relationships chapter, like Hebrews 11's the faith chapter, 1 Corinthians 15's the resurrection chapter. This is the relationships chapter. It says, defraud ye not one the other. This is the King James, except it be with consent for a time, that may give yourselves to fasting and prayer and come together again, that Satan tempt you not for your incontinency. Now notice fasting is very important there because we're supposed to pray without ceasing. So this would, if you're just supposed to not have relations because of praying, well, you're always supposed to have a prayer life. It could lead to a huge amount of false doctrine. You'll see what it says here in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse number 5. I see 4 and I see 6. I looked this up beforehand. Oh, okay. Do not deprive each other, except perhaps by mutual consent for a time, so that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Then come together again. So no fasting. So, fasting, it's very difficult and to have just real intimate relations when you're fasting, especially for time period, extended periods of time, this type thing. So it's very clear in the King James what this is about. It could see all types of confusion, so all types of discord in the New International Version if you're just supposed to not come together because of prayer. And then we'll go to 2 Corinthians 11:27. 2 Corinthians 11:27. And this, of course, is about Paul and the things he has suffered for the gospel's sake. It says, I have labored and toiled and have often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. So you'll see here in 2 Corinthians 11 and 27, it says, in weariness and painfulness, and watchings often, and hunger and thirst, in fastings often, in cold and nakedness. So you've got these instances in the New International Version that really diminish from a New Testament church age biblical view of fasting. And I wonder if that's not why the flesh is not running rampant. Now, why would Satan want to take fasting out? Well, because Jesus said this kind goes back to Genesis 1. There's certain classes of demons that only come out through prayer and fasting. So he wants to weaken it. So again, the 2011 does a little more justice to fasting than the 1984 original edition that is now, I think, completely out of print, but it still weakens fasting. So fasting in the New International Version of the Bible is still one of the doctrines, like Calvary, like abiding, like chastisement, like Lucifer, that are just missing, and it breeds a whole new Christianity. Stick to the book. God's preserved it in the English language. Jesus has got it in the King James Version of the Bible. Keep living. Don't change your sword in the midst of the battle. God bless you today in Jesus' name.